Hello, witches, warlocks, devils, and demons.
This is episode 4 of What Happens in the Crypt.
Today we're talking about Robert Eggers' 2015 film, The Witch.
This movie, in our opinion, is definitely the first really scary movie we're covering. Trigger warnings for this episode are gore, violence, and some disturbing imagery.
Yeah, like the scene with the crow.
Yeah.
It's a bit...
We'll get to that.
It's a lot for some people. The story for this movie can be pretty complicated and ominous, but we're going to try to sum it up. In 1630s New England, a family is banished from their small town. A farmer, his wife, and their children must now start a new life on the edge of a forest. Unknowingly, there is something dark in the forest that threatens to tear the family apart.
Robert Eggers, the director, is a really interesting guy, and he does a lot of things as far as writing his scripts that really make him stand out from other people in the genre. For example, he writes down the smells of his specific scenes. So in a farm scene where Thomason is working, he will write down manure smell.
Yeah, but it went a little far. He even said manure smell, but he went on to explain that back in the 1600s, manure wasn't just a bad smell. It was supposed to be comforting because it helped the farm and it helped plants grow. So it was also the smell of growth.
Right.
He went really far and did a lot of research into it.
Yeah, you definitely can tell from the final product of the movie that these little things that he wrote down and paid attention to made it into the movie. In The Witch, obviously, the twins are really young, and in one of the interviews we found online with Robert Eggers, he talks about how he had to create a Disney version of this super scary story to tell the twins and to even tell Caleb as well, right?
Yeah, obviously, people who are under the age of 18, and especially minors, how old? They're 7 or 8.
7 or 8, yeah.
The twins. You can't give them the full script of this movie.
Right.
It would be way too disturbing of content for such a young age. So you give them a dumbed down version. You give them, this is how you're supposed to feel in this scene. Maybe they don't know exactly what's happening in this scene.
Right. It definitely was interesting to hear someone talk about it that way. It had to be the Disney version where they kind of knew what was happening, but ultimately it was just you're going to be really scared for 30 seconds, but we're not going to tell you what's in front of you.
Yeah, there was even that interview where he was yeah, hold your breath and let it out. Now do it again.
Right.
And let it out. Now do it again. All right, now we're going to shoot this.
Yeah.
And it was just so he wouldn't have to tell the kids what was going on, but they would, look scared. They would get that expression.
Robert also has a background in Old English, and he was really interested in Shakespeare. And that was another thing that really made this movie so immersive, was how specifically correct, I guess, the grammar was. And he spent a lot of time researching that.
He even researched how the buildings would have been built, even down to the shape of the nails. He didn't want anybody to be able to watch this movie, even historians, and just go, that's not how it would have been done. He even mentions how they had to hire a special carpenter to build the roof because nobody in the area knew how to build a roof like that.
It definitely all adds to the final product of it. Thomason was played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and this was actually her first movie, and she's the oldest child in the family.
Her audition tape was actually the first one that Robert Eggers watched.
Originally, she wasn't going to be written as the main character, but after he saw her audition, he was so into her portrayal of the character that he changed the script a little bit.
Yeah, every character was supposed to have equal screen time, and eventually the script began to evolve, and it was clear that Thomason was meant to be the main character.
Thomason pretty much goes through a huge change and metamorphosis throughout the movie. She's going through puberty, she's becoming an adult, all of that stuff.
Her family even goes so far as to have a plan to get rid of her, to have her live with a different family.
Yeah, like she pretty much just terrifies them. And they already kind of talk about her like an outsider in a monstrous kind of way that they just don't understand anything that she's doing. And like she doesn't fit into the Puritan lifestyle or anything that they need her to fit into.
No, this movie's all about her trying to figure out who she is, her becoming her own self.
The family's kind of negative feelings about her slowly progress as the film goes on, and eventually they end up deciding that she must be a witch.
It's the only explanation for everything that's going on. She must be the one who has communed with the devil.
Yeah. She starts to embrace the actual idea of becoming a witch as the movie progresses and ends up murdering her mother towards the end.
Yeah, and she is one of the last characters to actually talk to the witch or Black Phillip.
Right. She's actually debatably like the purest character.
Yeah.
Up until she's the one that really sells her soul. But she starts off as really the innocent one that is just the black sheep. Black goat, black sheep.
Oh, that's good. Signing the book was truly her act of freedom at the end of this movie. Right away, within the first 10 minutes of this movie, it gets pretty dark pretty quick.
Right. So Thomason is playing peekaboo with Sam, who's the baby, and is played by Axton and Ethan Dube.
Boo! Sam? Samuel!
Another twins playing the same baby.
Always, whenever there's a baby in a movie, it's always actually a set of twins. Not just the Olsen twins, but all other movies of babies. His kidnapping shakes the family's faith in Thomason immediately, making her the outcast of the family.
They believe Sam is in hell because of her, because he was not baptized yet. Other characters throughout the movie question if he's in hell or not because of her.
Right, there's that really good scene of Caleb and the father walking through the woods, and they're discussing, like, the idea that he's not baptized and what is happening to his soul.
Well, discussing is a little strong, I think. It was more so Caleb asking and the dad just going, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about it.
Caleb is played by Harvey Scrimshaw, and he's the second oldest in
Such a cool name.
He's the oldest son, and he's definitely trying to prove himself to his parents, and he's confused by growing up in the woods. He's also kind of hitting that turning point from child to teenager, adulthood, all of that stuff, because of course during Puritan times they were essentially adults when they were like 15.
Oh yeah, he's not even 15, he's supposed to be like 12 or 13, and it's like, yep, you gotta use this gun that's bigger than you, and you gotta help provide for this family, even though you're a child. You'd be like a 5th grader.
Yeah.
You gotta be a full adult. And for him and Thomason, but for those two especially, you know, they've lived in a small town, but like, it's better. They've had friends. There were other children their age that they talked to.
You can definitely tell like the alienation aspect has affected Caleb a lot. As far as, like, he doesn't have, like, a frame of reference of who he's supposed to be within their single family community anymore.
Yeah, he doesn't have... There's literally nobody else around. He can't focus on friends. He can't focus on school.
Right.
There's nothing for him other than trying to prove himself to his parents and literally surviving. That's all they have.
The twins, Jonas and Mercy, are played by Ellie Granger and Lucas Dawson.
It seems like a lot of twins that are supposed to be twins
Never
are never actually twins.
Just babies.
Just babies. They're the third eldest in the family and are very immature in many ways, and they are always together.
They're a total nightmare. They're a menace. They ruin everything they touch. They're the worst.
I love this movie, and I don't know how I always forget that they're so annoying.
Yeah, they're little monsters.
Annoying. But I guess that's them, that they're supposed to be that way. That's
right.
their character. They're immature and always together.
But yeah, you see them chasing Black Phillip around with a stick. The mom gets so annoyed with them, she ties them to a fence. Like, they are just horrible.
And they're one of the first to actually commune with, dark. the devil's
Right.
Black Phillip. But it feels like it's lighthearted at first, probably just because they're so young.
And really the only way that we know from watching is the song that they sing, is they talk about the actual like crown on the Prince of Darkness, which
Yes.
they would not hear that if it wasn't
of
from the the goat.
Yeah, but it's such a lighthearted children's song that you kind of... I mean, I know when I first saw this movie, I just was like, oh, it's just a kid's song.
Right.
But, you know, we've watched this movie several times now, and it's dark, the song that they're singing.
Yeah. This is one of those movies, too, where I definitely enjoyed being able to watch it with subtitles after the first time, just because the Old English and the way that they talk is so different, and it's kind of hard to catch every word.
How could we talk about this movie without mentioning one of our favorite characters, Black Phillip?
Black Phillip was played by a real goat named Charlie, who was a total jerk for filming.
He was a nightmare to work with and actually sent the father, William, to the hospital early on in filming.
Yeah, Robert Eggers talks about how any scenes that they intended to film with him, they just had to wait for Charlie, aka Black Phillip, to happen to be running and then throw the twins in there to chase him or whatever they were trying to catch, because he wouldn't do anything on command.
Originally, they were supposed to have 3 goats for production, and they ended up just with him.
Yeah.
And he would not do what he was supposedly trained to do. He was supposed to, you know, jump and do his little goat dance
Yeah,
when he was
like buck on his legs.
Yeah, and buck. But yeah, they would basically just have to run around and hope that he would do what they needed.
Right.
I think Robert Eggers said Charlie didn't care about the production.
Yeah.
And now he's retired on a little farm somewhere.
I love that he retired after this movie. Like, retired in disgrace.
Retired in disgrace because he gored him.
Yeah. Black Phillip is seemingly harmless at first, but at the climax of the movie, he does reveal himself to Thomasin to be the devil. All the animals in the movie were real animals. So there's a hare, which is a really common familiar in the UK, kind of similar like to a black cat in the US, and the crow. And both the animals are noted as being a dream to work with in comparison to Charlie.
Yeah, they were known to get their scenes done in one take, which is perfect. It's one and done. That's all you need. And they do a good job. Those things are creepy.
Yeah, all the hare has to do is stare, and it does it so well.
William, the father of the family, he believes he is doing what is best for the family. He is a very religious man, and he's doing his best as a farmer to support his family. William is played by Ralph Ineson. Trying my best here with the names.
William is one of those characters that does blindly what he thinks is best for the family. For example, William ends up selling Catherine's cup to buy supplies for the family and tells no one. And this eventually becomes an important plot point when Thomasin gets blamed for stealing it.
Yeah, and at first does nothing about it.
That really shows, too, where he struggles with his religion as far as lying and feeling guilty about the theft as well.
William is also, I would say, the main reason why the family got exiled in the first place was because there was some sort of, they never really say, but there seems to be a religious dispute that he is just taking to the fullest extent.
Right. He's definitely a man that his word is law and there's nothing that can stray from it.
Well, his version of whatever
Yeah.
God's word is
Right.
law, and nobody can change his mind.
Catherine, the mother, is played by Kate Dickie. She's extremely strict, super religious, and she supports her husband, but eventually ends up doubting him as things change.
As we just mentioned with the silver cup, that moment when she finds out that he is the one, once William sells that silver cup, that's kind of it for her. That was like the last, her husband was like the last thing she had.
Right. She completely just loses her grip after that.
Throughout the whole movie, she is basically just trying to support him in whatever way she can. You know, she takes this exile even though she does not want it. She even at one moment breaks down and says how badly she wants to return to England even.
Right. She's definitely hanging on by a thread. And as soon as William starts to lie to her, and the foundation on which their whole lifestyle and family is built on those just like simple virtues, don't lie, don't steal, etc., she really falls apart.
Back to the peekaboo scene with Sam. The following scenes are... I don't know how I always block it out of my brain, I guess. Just because
you don't want to remember it.
Yeah, that scene is very disturbing.
So the witch that steals Sam ends up putting him in essentially like a butter churner.
Yeah, that's what I would call it.
And she grinds him up and rubs his little baby guts all over her.
Yeah, and it's like a darkly lit scene, but...
That's what's happening.
That's what's happening, and it's a lot.
Yeah, you wish you hadn't seen it.
After this happens, she is seen... She's like flying over the full moon,
right.
Floating.
She's flying.
And then the next time you see her, she is significantly younger in appearance.
So it seems like she either used Sam for a flying potion or something to make her younger, or both, but something sinister for sure.
Yeah, not good. Nothing good, I don't think.
Comes from a baby in a butter churner.
Yeah, nah.
Hashtag nothing good.
Hashtag nothing good.
I want to say it. Hashtag nothing good comes from a baby in a butter churner.
That's a very long hashtag. Just to give a little more detail and context of the cup stealing scene, William admits to stealing the cup too late, and Thomasin has already been blamed. And even though William admits to it, Thomasin already took the fall for it, and the mom, Catherine, she can never forgive her for it, even though it wasn't her fault.
Catherine really just put so much stock into Thomasin being this like bratty, evil member of the family that was causing them so much trouble, and then for her to find out that it actually was William that stole the cup, sold the cup, it totally messes her up. It's
even worse due to the fact that she had already blamed Thomasin, and then she found out, no, it was her husband, and it truly shakes her to her core, because the husband is supposed to be, this is, 1630, the husband is supposed to be not only the head of the family, but he's supposed to lead the family in holiness. He's supposed to be what the rest of the family is supposed to learn from, and supposed to, how the father acts, that's how you're supposed to act. What he does, you are supposed to do without question.
Debatably the most memorable scene in this movie is Caleb's death.
I would agree with that.
Caleb's return from the woods takes a really dark turn when the family is so excited to see him, and then eventually he reveals that he has been bewitched.
And he doesn't say he's been bewitched, but he starts to have a fit, and he ends up coughing up an entire apple that has a bite taken out of it, symbolizing that he has been bewitched.
Catherine also tries to save him by doing a bloodletting, where she lays him on his back and she cuts his head open.
Yeah, and you gotta drain out that bad blood. Mm-hmm. You gotta get it all out. Oh, that's not how it works, but whatever.
The scene was actually 11 pages long and all screaming, and it was really daunting for Eggers to shoot. Caleb's death and his prayer is all actually one shot.
And that is a pretty long prayer.
It's really creepy because it's definitely begins as a prayer, but it's like a weirdly like orgasmic state, and is it making fun of religion? Is he actually going to heaven and he's like seeing the light, or is he just insane, or is he being used as like a vessel from the devil to taunt them in their prayers? It's really like it hits all of those notes and you can't really tell which one is the thing.
I think that's really what makes it so memorable, is you don't know. Nobody knows. The family at the end of it is kind of like maybe he's actually seeing heaven, but as soon as it's like that prayer whatever ends, and then he dies,
right?
And then his mom Catherine is so devastated that she won't even leave the body. So
Yeah.
I think that is kind of a symbol of she doesn't know
Right.
and is horrified about it.
It's also in this scene that the twins go into a violent fit and claim that they can't say the Lord's Prayer.
Which back then was a symbol of also it was another symbol of being bewitched. The Lord's Prayer is probably the most commonly said prayer. So it was, if you could not remember it, then you had been touched by a witch.
And it makes sense for Puritan times, considering they lived by the Bible and by reciting all of those prayers. So there's no way even these bratty twins who are 5 years old don't know the prayer. Shortly after Caleb's death, William is super uncertain about if his kids are witches or if they're just playing games or what's going on, so he ends up locking them all in the barn by nailing the door shut.
Yeah, he locks them in there with all the goats and sheeps, and including Black Phillip.
Right.
I was actually I got super excited when we were watching it at this scene. Not because it's a disturbing scene, but it was the first time I noticed that at the very beginning of this weird, trippy scene, you can actually see the silver cup in the background.
Right, so Catherine ends up having a super upsetting hallucination where she sees Caleb is alive and he's holding Sam, and the cup is there in the background, all of the things that she's lost, and Caleb is speaking in this voice that is distorted, it's not his own,
sound like his.
And simultaneously we see Thomason and the twins in the barn, and the witch is arriving.
Yeah, she's you hear like a thud on the roof of the little makeshift barn thing, and then it like does this like medium, this like close up of her face, and she starts laughing.
It's gross.
Oh man, it's unsettling.
But more unsettling,
so much more unsettling,
would be that not only is obviously Sam and Caleb not there, but Catherine ends up, what she thinks is breastfeeding her infant son is really a crow pecking at her breast. That scene definitely has always stuck with me, and the first time I saw this movie, it was so shocking.
And the thing that wraps up the scene is that, it's now morning, and William didn't even know any of this happened.
Right.
That's the top. That's the cherry on top, is he didn't notice. And there's Catherine in bed next to him, just in her nightgown thing, and it's just bloodied.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even notice when he's crawling over her.
Right. Obliviously, William walks outside and finds the remains of the barn, and the twins are missing, and Thomason is laying on the ground.
As long as some partially eaten goats. He angrily starts to walk towards Thomason, but he does not make it.
Black Phillip kind of appears out of nowhere and headbutts him directly into a pile of logs.
Yeah, and that's intense too, because it wasn't just one hit done. He hits him one time first and like impales him.
Yeah, and it's really jarring because it's kind of William just looking around being like, oh my god, what happened to my farm? And then bam, Black Phillip hits him.
Then, with almost no break for Thomason, her mom jumps out of the house.
She's totally manic. She's losing her mind, screaming at Thomason that she's the reason her whole family is gone now, and she starts attacking her.
Literally 2 hands around her throat, starting to choke her out.
Thomason is really just trying to defend herself, but she ends up murdering her mother.
Yeah, she finds this knife on the ground, and it wasn't, like, you can even tell that she's not trying to kill her.
She's just trying not to be killed.
She's just trying to get her mom to stop.
Yeah. And after everything that happens, Thomason gets up, looks around, and walks back into the house and takes a nap.
Yeah, she's realized now she is truly alone. There is literally nobody around. I think they say they're a 2 days ride from the town. There are nobody for miles.
When Thomason wakes up, she decides to go and confront Black Phillip and see what this has really been about.
Yes, I mean, she has no other options at this point. You might as well. go up to the goat and see if it's true.
And she asks him multiple times to speak to her, reveal himself, and it's not until she threatens to walk away that he speaks to her.
I think she actually does start to turn around and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
What dost thou want? Wouldst thou like the taste of butter? A pretty dress? Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
It's my favorite scene. After that, he asks her to take off her blouse and sign her name. And as of most women at the time, she does not know. I took this scene as women weren't exactly taught how to write.
Right, she probably didn't actually know how to write her name.
I took it as she didn't know how to write her name, but she had the will to write her name, which is that's all Black Phillip needs. Is the will, and he'll do the rest.
Right, because there's that line as well that he would guide her hand.
And at this scene, we have the best transition of all time.
As Black Phillip is walking around the table, you see his hooves turn into a pair of black spurred boots.
It's so cool.
And it's so smooth, and it's so lovely. The costumes were designed by Linda Muir, and she actually made all of the costumes as real clothes, not as costumes. And she found as many things as she could to match historically accurate samples. And all of the visible seams on the clothing, even the inside of the garments, were actually hand-stitched. Black Phillip's human form, which we only see for 4 seconds when we see the boot, was actually also the most expensive costume of the whole movie.
I hope that these actually do last a long time, because a lot of big budget movies can stand to learn a lot from this movie.
Mm-hmm.
In some interviews, Robert Eggers talks about how Thomasin is based off of Elizabeth Knapp. Knapp was a woman said to be possessed in 1970s. Yes, 1970s. No, in 1670s Massachusetts. She was said to complain about pain with no cause, fits of convulsions, and seeing people who were not there. This was a time where it was not a question if magic and the devil was real. It was something everybody knew.
Right, it was a fact. Like, if you said you saw your neighbor levitating, they were a witch. It wasn't questioned.
Exactly. So if you had a mental disorder, then it must be you were witched or you are a witch, because no person can have a person like
bipolar disorder,
you can't
schizophrenia.
No, if there's something wrong with you, it has the logical step is it's magic. It's because a witch, you either are communing with the devil and that's the voice you're hearing, or
You've been cursed or bewitched. Yeah.
a little extra history nerd facts that I gotta add just because is that around the 1600s, this actually is theorized to be one of the leading causes of the Salem witch trials. There's a fungi called ergot fungi. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just doing my research here. It was a fungus that was not widely known about it, but it was the factor in multiple mass murders and massacres because it grows on wheat, which is then turned into bread, and it contains the properties while even baked into bread, but it can cause mass hallucinations, poisoning, so you could get sick from it. You know, you bake a loaf of bread, and it turns out that loaf of bread kills your neighbor's son, or that loaf of bread that you cooked and sold is now giving your neighbors and townspeople mass hallucinations.
Right.
And it spreads throughout the whole crop. So it wouldn't just be one person experiencing this. A whole town would experience this.
And that would definitely make sense as far as, like, pointing fingers at people being witches.
Absolutely.
Because, like, a joint hallucination that passes through a whole town would be very hard to figure out.
Oh, it would be almost impossible.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're hearing voices, then you start blaming others. And if you tell people, like, you can't just tell people, hey, I'm hearing voices. Because the second you do that, people are going to call you a witch, even in your own family.
One of the things that really sells the scary and the horror in this movie is the feeling of solitude. A gate is closed on the family when they leave their town, really showing that they are out and they're not welcome back.
Yeah, you really feel the isolation from this point on. All they have around them is woods. And that is actually, that's a natural forest. They didn't do anything to that to make it like a set. It's not CGI. That is them. That is all they had. It's just the woods.
Right. And it just feels so alienating and isolated that they're just in this little pocket of grass in this giant forest.
One family, nothing else for miles.
Yeah. The production designer on this movie was Craig Lathrop, and he really worked hard to make sure everything was as authentic as possible. So he was the main reason for the building of the different sets.
It's very impressive. The set looks so good. One of the things that also sold this movie was its use of natural lighting. So when they're outside, they're only being lit by the sun. I'm sure they use some diffusion and bounce boards, but it was really impressive to see that the movie, it was lit the way it would have been lit back then. And when they're inside, it feels very dark because they're only being lit by candlelight.
Yeah, it's definitely different to see a movie that makes that feel that way. Like, it's always like a candle gets lit and the whole room is illuminated. This movie is actually really dark.
Yeah, if you're not by a candle, it's dark as heck.
Mark Corvin was the composer for this movie, and he also did the score for The Lighthouse, which is also a Robert Eggers film, and In the Tall Grass.
The score for this movie is, I think the score is perfect for this movie. You feel fear and anxious and paranoia before you even see anything scary, before anything is even really happening. All they do is get to the edge of the woods, and there's just this droning effect.
Right, it just feels like something is about to happen at all times, and it's because of those underlying noises.
Yeah, it just leaves it. I always describe it as the music in this is like the sound of the hairs on the back of your neck standing up.
Yeah,
like, you
exactly.
Just feel uncomfortable.
You don't hear the music in this, but you feel it all the time.
Yeah.
We obviously adore this movie. We give it a 10 out of 10.
Oh yeah, you have to watch this. And it's perfect because it's on Netflix. So you can watch it. Somebody with Netflix.
Easy peasy.
Or if you really like it, you can buy the DVD. Because it's got some cool behind the scenes.
I actually pre-ordered the DVD for this when it came out 5 years ago. The death count for this movie is 5.
Which is pretty high for one family.
I was just going to say it's just the whole family.
Yeah, just the whole family.
Whole dang family. So before we end, I do have to ask you, would you like to live deliciously?
Oh, absolutely. I would sign. Before he even finished asking me, I'd be like, oh, yep, sign it.
Yeah, there's no question I would do anything to be a witch. I don't care what I have to do.
Yeah, not only that, because you're a pretty witchy person already, but Thomason is alone in the woods. Nobody in that town wants her, needs her, even knows what's going on with their family.
Yeah, she has nothing to lose. Like, I would be sad to to change my life completely, but I'm ready to be a witch.
For our next episode, we have a different kind of witch to talk about.
We're going to be talking about The Love Witch, which was made in 2016, but it feels like it's right out of the 80s.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's got some awesome looks and effects.